So I'm Petra, and it says sports psych, and I appreciate that that's what you put on the title, Hannah. And so one thing that I want to clarify, that I always clarify, I am not a sports psychologist. So I don't have my PhD, and I'm not a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist. It's a clarification that ethically I always make. Usually what happens is most people hear that and they're like, cool. So this is a sports psychologist, Petra, and it doesn't matter to most people, but just so you all know, I'm a master's level sports psychology consultant. So that's a distinction that I make. And what I really want to talk to, addressing the issues that you all just sort of raised, all the questions that you have about how do I get my athletes to do this or not to do that, where I want to go is to talk about motivation. Like, I think a lot of the things that are underlying what we're talking about is motivation, and also talking about underlying mindset. So even things like urgency, like whether or not I hustle in a drill, often comes from where is my mindset or what am I motivated by. So that's kind of the theme that I'm going to go through. And to get there, the first thing that I want to do, can I erase that? Okay, maybe. Sure. Oh, I found a pen.
Yeah.
Oh, it's here somewhere.
Aha, perfect, thank you. Okay, so what I'm gonna ask you all to do, and I'll have you start to think about it, jot down some notes just on one of those pages in front of you before you shout out your answers. I wanna ask you what makes an excellent performer in Ultimate. So when you think of like some of the best Ultimate players that you know, what I want you to write down are what are their qualities, what are their characteristics, like what is it about them that brings them to your mind as an excellent performer. If it helps you to name one person and list their qualities or characteristics, do that. If you want to think generally about excellent Ultimate players, you can also think generally, but just jot down some of the qualities, characteristics, attributes of excellent performers. Hannah, when do you need me to be done?
4:30.
Okay. 4:15.
4:15.
Cool. All right, so hopefully everyone has a few. What I'm asked to do is I want to create one giant list up here on the board. So whenever you're ready, start shouting them out and I will try to get them up here.
Consistency.
Motivated.
Focus. Competitive. Athletic.
Skilled technically. Passionate.
High personal standards.
Not scared of, well, not scared. Expand it, but that can go anywhere.
Cool, not scared.
Self-aware or plays with themselves.
Adaptable.
Knowledge of strategy.
Resilient.
Pause.
Fearless. Takes measured risks. I don't know how to put that down.
Gunslinger.
Yeah, that.
Okay,
Unmeasured.
does that do it for now? Okay, good enough? So on your own list, what I want you to do, so the things that you wrote down, and also consider the things that people put up here that maybe weren't on your list, I'm gonna ask you to categorize those things and to write a little mark next to them on your paper. So I want you to define, are the things that you wrote down, are they an attitude, the way that person chooses to think every day? Are they a skill, something that person has developed over time through repetition? Or is it a gift, something they were born with? So just next to each of yours, jot down any of these up here, attitude, skill, or gift, A, S, or G.
Maybe more than one.
Sure. Just put the one you think it's more first. All right. Most people, still have people working. Okay, we'll go through these. If you're still working, go ahead and you can vote as you go. So what I want to do is, if you're the person that gave, if you can remember which one you gave me, I'll hear from you for sure. But let's vote. So consistent.
Skill.
Attitude as well.
Skill, attitude. Skill, attitude. Okay, so we'll go primarily skill. We'll give it a little A. Motivated. Across the board. Okay. Focused. Attitude.
I feel like that's a skill too.
I think it's also a skill.
Okay. Competitive.
Well, I was thinking, I don't know, it shouldn't be a gift. But
Say-
it could be a gift.
Okay. So let me hear. So we had attitude. Some people said skill. So I'll go. Athletic.
Skill.
This is fun, isn't it? Technically skilled. Crushed it. Passionate. Attitude. Across the board. Okay. High personal standards.
Could be a skill. Could be a skill too.
Not scared.
Attitude.
Skill too.
Attitude, skill. Okay.
Definitely done that.
Self-aware.
Skill.
Skill.
Gift.
Yeah.
So we have skill and gift. Adaptable.
Skill.
I thought that was
Attitude.
Attitude.
Yeah.
Knowledge of strategy.
Skill.
Sounds pretty resounding. Resilient.
Attitude and a skill.
And a gift.
Fearless.
Attitude. Whatever not scared was.
Ability to take measured risk.
Skill.
Skill.
Attitude. Sorry, I put attitude.
Gunslinger gift. Gunslinger.
Skill. What is it? That could be skill.
Attitude.
I think it's an attitude, right? That's the whole.
Attitude. Okay. Okay. So there's a couple of reasons why I did this. One of the primary reasons that we do this, and you can do this activity also asking the same question of leadership. What makes a great leader? Okay, so you can do the same thing. And what you see, there's a couple of reasons we do this. What do you primarily see? What's mostly up there?
Attitude.
Okay, what's second?
Skills.
And what's third?
Gift.
Okay. What does this tell you about those excellent performers that we know?
A lot of it is an attitude.
Yeah, those people that we watch on the highlight reels that your kids are watching on YouTube, right? Like the kid, whoever it is that they're watching on all the channels, we see those people and we often sort of hold them to the standard. And what happens is sometimes we hold them to the standard and people are like, like how cool that would be, but how do I get there? And what this brings us back down to is that for most things, what makes people the excellent performers that we know them to be is their attitude, how they choose to think on a daily basis, and their skill, what they choose to put their effort into through repetition over and over and over. What message does that send?
Control this.
American dream.
A little bit. It sends the message that it's within your control, right? That any of us with the right attitude and with the right work ethic, that we can get to be a place that we want to be. The other thing, let's talk though about these elements of gift. Are some people more athletic than others? Are some people more naturally resilient than others? Yeah, for the most part, can we increase that? Like, even if I'm not as athletic, can I raise my level of athleticism? Yeah, same with resilience, right? So even those things that sometimes we think of are gifts, are they things that we can develop over time? Yes, for the most part. Yeah, I mean, not all things, like height. Right, there are some things that like are in our genetic code and we can't change them, but for the most part, there are things that even if we were born with a certain level, we can still grow and improve on that. That's a huge message, like that, as in terms of underlying messages for you all as coaches, this is a huge one. That hopefully everything that you do, you're sending the message that can be developed, it can be learned, it can be adapted, it can be adopted by a certain player, that they can choose, they have some control over whether or not they're able to do that thing. And so one of the things, and I'll just throw this on your radar now and we'll come back to it later, is just take a look at how many places you wrote gift on your paper, like for you, because I know we had some that were multiple votes. If for you they were gifts, I want you to think about how our beliefs about those things, if it's a gift or a skill or an attitude, changes the way that we coach it. So if I believe that passion for the sport is a gift, and I see a kid who's not passionate the way that I am about the game, how might I approach that kid?
Probably not going to try and instill your own passion on them that much.
You might not coach them very well or give them much feedback that they're not worth it.
Yeah, like if you don't have this thing that I was born, that I have, that is true to me and always has been part of me, if you don't have that, you're never going to have it. So why am I going to try to work to build that within you? So just be thinking about, just for your own awareness, what are the things that you might think tend to be more of a natural gift, and be aware of how that influences your coaching. And that's another theme of things that I'm going to talk about as we go through. So with that, kind of leading into like, okay, well now if we know it's attitudes and skills, how do we get people to want to build those things? Because some of these things take work and effort, time. Most of them do. So what I want to do is I want to talk about motivation. I'm going to ask you all to, same thing, jot down a few notes for yourself. I'm going to ask you to jot down 2 columns so you could kind of make a T-chart for yourself. I want you to jot down, how do you motivate yourself? So how do you motivate yourself? Make a list of the ways that you, and if you write like a reward, like I reward myself, make it specific. What exactly do you give yourself, right? Do you give yourself a cookie? Like, do you give yourself that you get to go on a shopping spree? Like, what type of reward? So anytime you write down a general category, then try to just label the specific thing for both yourself and others. So how do you motivate yourself and how do you motivate other people? I think everyone has a few. So let's do this. Let's kind of bring it to the group again. And as you hear things that other people say, like if you also use them or if you just want to write it down for record, do that. And I'll try to contain my drawing now to a smaller space. So tell me the things, how do you motivate yourself?
Set goals.
Imagining visualizing the reaction or the results of success.
Encouragement.
Past failures.
What other people might expect.
And is that like not wanting to disappoint people, or like?
Yeah, not wanting to disappoint people or just other people have a certain, like, hold you in a certain light or something. So, yes, that goes with disappointment.
Cool.
I think similar to that is trying to impress someone.
Or trying to
Yeah.
There's a sense of responsibility, like, you have a position, you want to make sure you're living up to the expectations there.
Internal dialogue.
Pretty good.
I motivate myself by picking something small that can get me going. Small step.
That's a pretty good list. Anything else you want to get up there? Not up there? Okay. How do you motivate others?
Find and reinforce their success.
An encouragement.
Pointing out how awesome it's gonna feel.
Like promise of success or the.
Providing like specific goals or focuses.
Challenging them.
Discussing the effect of like next steps, like in college, this is what you're going to need.
And like with both self-know, there's like connecting it to the big picture, like why we're doing this, like the, where it leads.
Show you care.
Positive and negative incentives.
Let's hear a couple examples of those.
Negative is laps. Slash sprints. Positive is just like giving out jerseys or stickers or things like that.
Yeah.
Points.
Candy.
Donuts.
Unhealthy. Sugary.
Perfect.
Recognition too.
Praise based on effort, skill, or strategy.
EP, that's all right there. Now you know. Okay, pretty good list. And so what I want to do is like we know how to motivate ourselves, and for the most part we know how to motivate other people. But there are those times when we like wonder, like, why can't I just get you moving, right? Like, why aren't you sprinting? Why, like, how many times do we see someone just go through the motions and they're not putting in that full effort? And we know that in a drill, if they're not giving that full effort, the feedback you're giving them, it's not as authentic as it could be, and it's not actually going to help them improve, right? So I mean, it might, but if they're not giving their full effort and you're giving feedback, what are they saying to themselves in their mind?
Well, I just wasn't trying. I just wasn't trying my hardest.
Yeah, I wasn't trying my hardest. I could do it if I tried. It's an out, right? So one of the things I want to talk about is how do we get people motivated to want to give their full effort without having to poke and prod, without having to provide motivation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, so that yellow arrow that you have on your piece of paper is basically represents what's called self-determination theory, and it's based on the work by Ed Ryan and Richard Ryan and Ed DC. Really cool, and this is one of the things that I'm going to connect back to like what everyone else has talked about so far this morning, are the different types of motivation, what's good about them, what the costs are, what the benefits, like why we use them, why we might not want to use them. So the first one, how many people have heard of intrinsic motivation? Good, someone explain to me what that is. Explain to everyone.
From within.
Yeah. So from within, and let's keep going. Other
Something
understandings.
They naturally want to do as part
Right,
of
it's
your
kind of that
persona.
gift piece where it's like something that is instilled.
Yeah, like it's that thing that we want to do because we enjoy doing it, right? So that like the task, the thing that we're doing is gratifying. In and of itself, the thing that we're working on, that's just fun, right? So for a lot of us, is that playing Ultimate for you? Like in some respects, like you go and you keep doing that thing because you enjoy doing it. So intrinsic motivation, that's like the gold standard of motivation. If we can get people to enjoy the thing that they're doing, they're going to keep doing it, right? Like if you enjoy eating cookies, you're just going to keep eating cookies. Like it's just like the natural way to motivate yourself. Even in Ultimate, so how many of you all like playing Ultimate is intrinsically motivating? How many of you, for you all, are the tasks that you have to do to play Ultimate at your best? So track workouts, lifting, drills that sometimes feel monotonous, like those things, how many of those tasks do you also like, yeah, all of those are also intrinsically motivating? Less so, right? So like playing the game itself is fun. And do you see that in your athletes? When they get to game day, are they motivated? Yeah, like they want to play. And sometimes we have to recognize that the things that we need to do to get the thing we want aren't always as intrinsically motivating, but we still have to motivate somehow to get there. So that's why we have this whole other spectrum of motivation, right? There are other sources, or even something we really enjoy. You'll really enjoy playing Ultimate. How about when it's like 30-mile-an-hour crosswinds and snowing? Like, is it as intrinsically enjoyable for you all then?
You have the right clothes.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yes, I'm in. But for most of us, we're kind of like, well, those conditions change that a little bit for me. It's not as fun when the conditions change. So then we also might need some different types of motivation. So I'm going to start, all of this is what we're talking about is extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic is coming from within, extrinsic is for the most part like there's something else acting on us. And we'll start over here with instrumental, which is literally something else like pushing us to do it. So this is where we get to rewards and punishment. So we're talking about, this positive or negative reinforcement. And so this is, if we don't do this, we're going to run laps. Tell me, what else does this sound like? Give me some examples. Rewards or punishment?
Carrot and stick.
Yeah, so the carrot and the stick. And give me like a specific example you might use when coaching. What does that sound like?
If you have a turnover, you do like push-ups.
Yeah, for every time we drop the disc, we're doing 5 push-ups. It's another one.
Winning team only has to do 1 sprint, losing team does 2.
Yeah, winning team.
Then you get to sub out and everyone else has to do it.
Yeah. Or sometimes the other way around, right? King's Court. Yeah. So we're pushing people to do a behavior by giving them some external driver. What happens when you take that thing away?
They won't do it.
Yeah, right. If we take that motivation away, then the behavior disappears. So this is like one of the least sustainable types of motivation that we have, because without this specific instrument, we're not going to do the thing that we need to do. So does it work? Does it get people going? Does it motivate people? Yeah, for the most part in the short term, but in the long term we run into problems with that. The other thing about this, there are some other costs to using this type of motivation. Any guesses on what they are?
Buy-in. Like with punishments, if it's too negative, then it isn't fun, and they're like,
Yeah, so you might kind of lose some respect or some buy-in from your players.
Or might, sorry.
Go ahead.
Like feel like a job to them. Like I have to do this in order to get my prize.
Yeah, one of the things, I'm going to change that around just a little bit, but it's exactly what you said. Rewards and punishments can actually undermine intrinsic motivation. So if you were intrinsically motivated to do the thing, and then someone pays you $1 every time you do it, if they stop paying you $1, you stop doing the thing. Right? Research supports that, experience support, like it starts to undermine that intrinsic motivation because we've now retrained our brain to say, I'm doing this thing because I'm getting a reward or I'm avoiding a punishment. So just something to think about, like how often we do that. Even like, what if you have a kid who loves to run? Like they love running, they love doing push-ups. But if it becomes a punishment, do we drive out that love of fitness for them? We can. I think those kids are rare. I didn't know those kids when I was growing up. Okay, the other thing with this is it increases blaming. So when something goes wrong, what you see from people who are motivated in this way is you see an increase in blaming other people or circumstances when things go wrong. Right, so then when you lose a game, well, it was because of X or it was because of Y, and blaming anyone but themselves, so kind of pushing it outward. Interesting. Okay, what I'm going to do is kind of move this way, so we're going to start moving towards more sustainable sources, but this other one is shame or guilt. So the next moving up is shame or guilt, and this is, I'm going to do the behavior because I want to avoid these negative emotions. I want to avoid feeling ashamed and I want to avoid feeling guilty. What does that sound like or look like in coaching?
Developing a relationship and then leveraging that relationship to get what you want.
That's like the overarching thing, yeah.
Why you turn it over? Now you get to play D.
Yeah, okay, so maybe, let's see, if you turn it over, now you're playing D. That's funny, that's built into Ultimate. I can't help that, okay?
Well, it's the tone in which you say it, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's sarcasm
I
around
also
it.
love playing D.
Yeah,
Throwing it away.
yeah.
Your team is depending on you for whatever this thing, so if you make this mistake, then your team is not gonna feel very good.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, making a whole team do push-ups if you turn over the disc on a session.
Yeah, that one person, right? I mean, you're trying to motivate everyone through, hey, you want to avoid feeling guilty for making the entire team run, right? Or do push-ups or whatever that is. And so, does it work?
Yes.
It can.
Spots.
Yeah, in spots. And again, it tends to be more short-term, right? So thinking about this type of motivation, it tends to be more short-term. And what are the costs? What's the negative side of using that type of?
Respect from your players, for sure.
Yeah.
Constantly guilting them.
Yeah, so maybe respect your players and losing that trust, like that relationship that you built. Yeah, so losing trust.
You don't take risks. You're afraid you're
Yeah, so they might play scared. And look, that's one of the things we want of our excellent performers is we want them to be fearless. We want them to take those measured risks. And so in some sense, are we undermining the type of athlete that we want by leveraging this? And just think, and something I want you all to be doing as we go through, we all use all of these types of motivation in some way or another, one day or another, just depending on what words come out of our mouth, right? So we've all probably said, hey, if you don't do this, you're gonna run a few laps. We've all at some point probably said, hey, don't let your teammates down, right? Make sure you throw a good pass. Other costs to this, it actually increases anxiety. So when people are motivated by shame or guilt, we see an increase in anxiety. Anxiety, and I teach this all the time, doesn't have to have a negative effect on performance, but often can it. Like if we raise that level of anxiety, we can see a lower level of performance, right? It's the same thing, those fine motor skills start to decrease. So know that you can start to raise that in your athletes if that's how they're motivated. Okay, moving now much more towards like getting into those sustainable types of motivation. So one of the things we can say is we value the outcome of the behavior. And this one is a little bit specific, and I'm gonna do like a second caveat off of it, or like a second part of this. So valuing the outcome, like theoretically, let's think about if I had to run a track workout, right? That's what I have to do in order to get fit for Ultimate, is I value the outcome because I know that running makes me healthy, and I value being healthy, right? So the result that I get from doing the thing, well, I value that, like that's important to me. So I can value the outcome. The other one that I want to put in here, and it kind of goes between this one and the next one we're going to talk about, is adopting the values of others. So how many of you had this experience, like if you can think back to a coach or maybe your parent or someone who was influential in your life, that you could like recognize that by some interaction, this person values X. Like this person values respect, or this person values hard work. And because you respect and trust that person, do you start to say, oh, I kind of value that thing too, right? And you start to internalize that other person's values. So those two can kind of go hand in hand in here. Cost and benefit of that type of motivation. Does it work?
Takes a while.
Yeah, so sometimes it takes a while. Like these tend to be immediate, right? We're like, yes, we can prompt people to action in the short term. I can get them moving. This one can sometimes take a little bit for us to get to the point of like, wow, that track workout. I'm gonna go do it, right? Because I value the outcome.
One thing really interesting with the younger players, like I've been working with my high school team and we have a middle school team, and that long-term picture of like eventually you'll be able to make the team or do whatever else, like they're so immediate, it's really hard to make a connection to the long-term goal.
Yes, and like biologically, we know that's true of the athletes that you all are working with, right? Like the frontal lobe development, their ability to actually like pair together the short term to the long term, like they physiologically, like biologically don't have that fully developed yet. So we know that that's true. And so sometimes we kind of have to train that in them, and we can start to help them develop that the more that we make those connections. Self and identity. So as we move closer to intrinsic motivation, we're getting at like most sustainable types of motivation. What this is saying is, going back to the track workout example, I value hard work, I value commitment, so I'm gonna do this track workout because it's who I am. It's a part of me that I value that hard work and that commitment. That's who I am, so that's why I'm gonna do this thing. So it's not just that I wanna get healthy and I wanna be fit for ultimate, that kind of leaves me here, but you know what, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna show up for my team and I'm gonna make sure that I'm there, because that's who I am. That sounds different, right? Like that type of motivation sounds different. How do these two show up in practices, like in the things that we actually say as coaches? What does that sound like?
Sounds like you're trying to develop a culture.
We are a team that.
Yeah, we're a team that works hard. So we're doing this because we're a team that works hard, or whatever that culture identity is. And so you're starting to connect the dots. So now I'm like jumping back to C's conversation, right, about developing team identity and like individual identity. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute of how we can tie all of this together. But keep going. Like, it was pretty easy to come up with examples of what this sounds like when we're actually coaching at a practice. But like, what do these actually sound like when we're coaching? So we had one like, hey, we're going to work, we're working hard because that's who we are, right? Or we value hard work.
We're a scrappy team.
Yeah, we're a scrappy team. What else?
You gotta want it.
Oh, you gotta want it. Why would we want it?
Because we put in effort, or like we are hardworking and committed to being here.
Yeah. So a couple things. It's harder to come up with because we do it less. Like it's more challenging to get people to this point in terms of how we motivate them. And this is where I want to spend like a fair amount of our time talking, because what we're doing here is, if you can get people to motivate from this place, you will do a lot less work in motivating them, right? It takes a lot less. In the beginning, it might take us a little while to get going, but once you build this within people, now they're self-motivating. Now we have self-determined teams, we have self-determined individuals, and they're doing things on their own. They're pushing each other in that drill. Like, they're gonna start holding each other accountable, like, hey, pick up your speed, right? Pick up your pace, give your full effort, because you've developed this within each individual and within each team. What do you think the benefits of that are, of motivating from because it's who we are? Like, what does that do for us?
Less coaching. They coach themselves, basically.
Yeah, like maybe not on the technical, tactical stuff, right, the strategy, but yeah, they hold themselves accountable, they motivate each other.
Yeah, more democratic way of coaching, right? Like, you don't have to say, I need you guys doing X, Y, and Z workout. They're working out on their own, tailoring it to their own.
And how about for you all? Like, I think you all said this for yourself, like in how you motivate yourself. So I'm trying to come back to where it is. Like, so responsibility, right? Like, you have that role, that's how you see yourself. You're gonna do this thing because it's how you see yourself. What else? I'm trying to think of it. And then how about how you motivate others? Put on awesome feelings, challenge, specific focus. Next step, big picture. So we could tie that also to big picture, right? Of like making sure, hey, we're doing this because of this greater thing. So it might be a little bit more work up front, but really trying to get people to their values. And in terms of having the team start to coach themselves, what I want to do is come back to in C's conversation. She was talking about individual identity, right? Player identity. That was one of the first things that she said. And in that, she was talking about, she had the different components of that. So like your role on the team, your position, coach expectations, like there were a number of things that fell under that. Something that I want to encourage you all to do, help your players develop their own identity, not just based on the things that they do. So their identity, and this goes, like you'll start to see this tie into praise, right? Effective praise that we talked about downstairs, which is, you're not a handler, you're not a cutter, you're not, you're not a state champion. You're not the things that you do. You're a human being, right? Like, you're a human being, and so what we're talking about here are values. So let me ask you this question: if I asked you all, who do you want to be? Like, what's the type of person that you want to be? Like, give me a few words. Who is it that you want to be? What do you want to be known for?
My empathy.
Dependable.
Empathy, dependable.
Hard work.
Give me a few more.
Maybe known for like making a difference.
Yeah, making a difference. What else? Positive. Approachable.
Useful.
Useful. Most of us, like if I'd given you more warning than like just putting you on the spot, like you would have come up with, wow, like who do I want to be? How do I want to be known? That's a conversation I encourage you to have with your athletes. So Scott was talking about getting to know your athletes, asking them what's going on in their lives. Ask them who they want to be. Like, what type of person do you want to be? Like, what you can also start to see that. Can we see other people's values by the way that they behave? Yeah, so like I could probably get that you're empathetic, like just by watching you, right? I can pick out that player on my team who's compassionate. I can pick out the player on my team who's competitive, because we can see that stuff. So as you're watching, as you're engaging your athletes, don't just engage about like the things that they do in their life, the things that happen, but engage with who they are. Like if anything, if there's anything that we can do as coaches, is to like give people, and especially young athletes, space to be whoever it is that they are. And not tied to the things that they do. Or the things that they, in particular, the things that they accomplish. Why is that so important? Why is it important to say, I value you as a human being, like who you are, your values, the person that you want to become, not just that you've accomplished all of these things, that you're in AP biology, you know, that you just aced your math test, that last year you won a state championship. Why that distinction?
Well, those things are finite. They have an ending point. And so once that thing is over, what else do you have left?
Yeah. And point you're out, you just retired, but like this is like a thing, and any of us who've like kind of ended some part of what we thought was our identity. So when I stopped playing soccer, a lot of us go, well, if I'm not a soccer player, who am I? And so thinking about like where I want to have this discussion is not just how do you motivate your kids in drills and, you know, to play the game, but I want you to think about, and the same thing, the words that Scott ended with were the things that I was going to end with too, of like, think about the impact that you can have on them after they leave sport. Every day when they go back to their everyday life, the things that you do in your environment is going to teach them how to deal with all those other things in the outside environment. And so with that idea, if we can teach them like you're valued, you're worthy, you're a human being, and like you're cool and you're awesome and you're like, you know, like that this person is good, all these other things become an extra. This is great, this is fun, like this is what drives me. But we're gonna get to a lot more of these things if we can separate our identity from the things that we do, from the things that we accomplish. Does that resonate with you? Like, because I'm nerding out and enjoying myself, and so I want to make sure that you like tell me where you're at. Like, what are you thinking? Yeah.
I'm thinking of Batman. It's not because it's very contradicting to a line in Batman where he says, "It's not who we are underneath; it's what we do that defines us."
Oh man.
And I just thought it was like exact.
You're saying I'm not the coach you want, but I'm the coach you need.
I'm not the coach you need, I'm the coach you want.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I thought of immediately when you started saying that. I'm like, that's the opposite of this line from Batman.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm gonna go there for just a second because I can't help myself. Do the things that we do also define our character, or can they?
Yes.
Yeah. And so how like, I made it sound like it was really easy to separate the two. Is it going to be that easy? No. But talking about values, like the way that we aspire to be, is one way to like make sure that we're making sure this is strong. And yes, like our character, the things we say, the things that we do, the things we accomplish, we will like sometimes tie that to who we are. But if we did these things because we're this person, that's different than I'm this person because of these things.
One of the little disharmonies in my mind there is trying to, like, I've trained myself not to coach, you know, wow, you're a great player, or you're really fast, or you're a great thrower, or you play great defense as a state of being, versus the way you shut that guy down, or your footwork in there was really good or something. And so a lot of the specific praise is directed towards a behavior versus towards an intrinsic quality, and so kind of trying to figure out which one is better, like the athletic things that are qualities are not to be emphasized, but the personal traits are, or something like that.
And you're sitting here being like, I swear that 10 minutes ago you told me to praise the effort, strategy, or skill, like the thing they did, not the person that they are, right? You're right. And they're different things, and I want to distinguish, because part of the other way that we can praise is you're still not praising the ability or the trait, right? So it's not you're so athletic or you're such a good cutter. Like those are still kind of labels of a thing that you just happen to be like, you're good at that. But we're labeling, you could go, you know what, you are such a hard worker. That's praise I could give, because what am I reinstilling in them? That I appreciate their hard work. Yeah, that effort, right? So that might be the effort part. But if you know your kid's values, like, so if you know someone wants to be empathetic, like if I just know that of Lindsay, is I would, like if I catch her in that moment, I could just praise that, and I'd be like, you know what, I really appreciate the way that you saw that from that other person's perspective in that moment. Like I think that really helped that new younger player who doesn't know what they're doing. When you shared that you've been there, that helped that person develop. So I really appreciate your empathy. So when we want things to be lasting, do praise character, like values. Does that make sense? So instead of saying like, and this goes like, so strategy or the thing that you did. So, and then how we can build it within people is instead of saying, thank you for being so helpful, as in like, that's a thing that you do. Thank you for being such a good helper. If that's a quality you want to develop in people, label it as that character or that trait. You're still going, whoa.
Specific examples, and like an example, and Ben, you might remember from our game, we have one really unique fellow who, we have a lot of really unique fellows.
Yeah.
Everybody's really unique. The team happens to be fellows. Anyway, like we came out flat in our game against Lakewood, and we're down 4-0, and then we started hucking it to Alano, and Alano was making these catches, and then at the end of the game, like he kind of went over to the sideline, got sick for a while, but then at the end he was like, I didn't play that great, like I only had a few goals and stuff, and I was like, but Alano, your confidence as a receiver is what like initiated our offense. Like once you started going out there and getting that, our whole team changed because of you, and you might have felt like you didn't play that great a game, but you were the one who picked us up and allowed us to compete in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to figure out where that falls on the spectrum of
Help him out. So your confidence and your your aggression on offense is what helped our team get to the place that we got to. Where does that fall?
I think it's bigger picture things, right? Like that kid is not going to be able to see that in that moment, but you're able to see that, and just by identifying the bigger picture for him, he's able to appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like it's value outcome, right? Because he didn't self-identify as playing well, and he didn't see the character trait that brought the best out in his team in that moment.
Right.
So you have to, I guess, like it's value outcome in terms of, okay, maybe you didn't see it, but what you did in that moment helped us get to this location in the game. Like we were nowhere, we were down 4-0, and now we were competitive at the end because of the way you started playing.
And because like these are set up like they look like silos. Not that simple, right? Like our motivation, like we can flow back and forth within this very smoothly. And in that, like as I'm thinking through in this moment with all of you is to say a little bit of, do you value confidence in players? Cool, you showed him that in that moment by praising your confidence and so your confidence, the trait you want him to have, and the way that you displayed that in this game really helped your team out. So that's praise I would keep for sure. Right? And I think, and we're leaning more towards this internal side, absolutely. So part of
better do it again or else we're gonna.
Yeah, right?
Next time you're down, I expect you.
Yeah. And in some sense, like, here's the other crazy thing. Like, if your kids came to you in as blank slates and you did everything right, like, okay, maybe we would keep people over here all the time, but might that kid have some experience where now that he knows, wow, I did this thing, and might he take himself here? If I don't do that thing in the future, oh man, I'm gonna let my team down. Okay, so you can do it, like, your kids aren't coming to you with blank slates, they have other experiences and just starting to learn and recognize what those are, and as best as you can, bringing them back to, I value who you are and the things that you do in, like, those helpful qualities that you're looking for. Is that making sense? And so part of this, and where I want to tie this to as I look at the list of questions that you all asked, so one of them, so kind of that level of urgency, right? Tying back to in a drill, like, if urgency is something you want, or like intensity, or look like you care, like look like, right? Like, look like you want to be here. Start, like, think about how can you label that, like, and catch someone doing it right. So you are going to have, most of you will have the kid that, man, just goes all out every practice. Do, not all the time, like, don't call them out all the time, but can you praise that? And not just why, like, not just praise it, but why is that good? Why is that helpful? Because that's how we're going to learn, right? And what I want to do next is get into a little bit of, and the other part, okay, so then for your point with the B team, right? So thinking about if we're going to go into a game and just get crushed, like, or if we have, like, if our team identity over here is like, well, we are the second team, right? What does that look like? And how do you stay in it? And how do you motivate, even though, like, you might get crushed in every game, is getting your team to a place of why you're here. What is your bigger picture? Like, yes, we know this might be true, and we're still going to, like, what are your team values? We're still going to work hard. We're still going to put our best foot forward. We're going to still have spirit of the game. And how you measure your success is different. Yes, do we like to win? Absolutely. Do we like to be competitive, have fun, like play in those really tough games? Yeah. But can we still get to a place of learning and growth without that? Absolutely. So be thinking about that in terms of motivation. Okay. The other thing, though, sometimes, and I said that your kids don't come to you with a blank slate, I'm going to change over here to mindset. How many of you have heard of fixed or growth mindset? Excellent. Okay, so this isn't new. So all I want to do is pair this conversation, pair what you already know of fixed or growth mindset with coaching. And one distinction that I make that Carol Dweck, who's the original author, I don't think she makes as explicitly, but in my work with athletes, it's like one of the number one ways that it shows up, is, so if a fixed mindset is the belief that talent, abilities, and qualities are static and cannot be developed. These are the gifts, the things that we were born with, and I either have it or I don't. This is a part that I add, because when I work with athletes, especially like individual consulting one-on-one, when fixed mindset tends to show up most for my athletes, they're tying this, who they are, like, it's definitive of who they are. So if they fail, then they are a failure, right? It comes back to who they are, like, it's so connected. And so it leads to fear of failure and the desire to look skilled. So I want to look good, right? I want to impress other people. And I'm scared, right? We talked about not being scared or being fearless or being that gunslinger. If I'm in a fixed mindset, that's a harder place to be. So growth mindset, on the other hand, is that belief, the belief that talent, ability, qualities can be changed and developed, and that they don't define who they are. That's like two things, like, I'm a human being, and these are the things that I can do. But these things don't define who I am. So being able to separate those two. And this leads to, like, a mastery orientation, or the desire to grow and develop, to just get better at the thing. And someone said this morning, and I can't remember now who it was, but this sense of, most of us have been playing Ultimate for a number of years, and we know, like, we still haven't mastered the game. I've met a high schooler athlete or two who thinks they have. And with that, like, if they think they've mastered it, they think they've gone everywhere, that they've done all the growing and developing they can do, they might be here. And so how do we get people to this place where, no, you can still learn, you can still grow? And what are the things that we all as coaches in that self-awareness might be saying or doing that are inadvertently putting people here? Does that make sense? So one of the things is that praise based on, like, person or traits. That's one of the things that can get people here. So ability or trait-based praise. How many of you all are aware of where you have a fixed or growth mindset? A little bit. So Hannah, give us an example if you can.
I feel like for growth mindset, it tends to be more academic for me. It's something that I'm like, oh, I can spend all the time in the world on this, and like, education wasn't the super easiest thing, but I did it well, but I spent a lot of time, and therefore, like, I have a PhD, and like, I can keep learning. But for me, fixed mindset tends to be more in an athletic realm, and so I do realize, as you were talking, I've been thinking about this, like a side conversation in my head.
Yeah.
But that's very much a place that I have a growth mindset with my kids, but a fixed mindset for myself on the field. I think stepping back from like being one of the fastest kids, like playing sports in high school and always being praised for being so quick and fast. And so that has been like, oh, if I don't have that, then what do I have?
Yeah. And so for me, the example of fixed mindset, math, man. Like I can remember from like 1st grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, I could tell you about those horrible experiences, but I'm just not good at math. I know this research, like I've read it, I'm not good at math and I'm never gonna be good at math. Like, and to the point, so like for me, how that shows up, things like when the bill comes at a restaurant, I'm like, can you do the tip? like I don't want to accept that raise, and so I don't try. Like I've tried. I had to take math all the way through college. It didn't work, right? So my effort is pointless for me. So for me, like one area I know is math. So you and I are a little bit different, because then growth mindset for me has been athletics. Like I look at people like Scott, and I look at people who like didn't develop athletically until much later in life. You know, and like started reading research about like women in particular. Like, why on earth they make us think that like collegiate athletics for women should be the last place we play? Women don't peak until like their mid-30s. Like that's different. So for me, like I look at a growth mindset in terms of one of them is athletics. Like I can get faster, I can get stronger if I put in the effort, if I put in the work. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is just think for yourself, and you don't have to write anything down in this moment, but do think about not only like what areas in your life you might have a fixed or growth mindset, but come back to this conversation. If you just think about ultimate and about coaching, are there areas that you think you have a fixed or growth mindset? Right? So do you think that being athletic, is that a gift? Is that something that people are born with and they can't really develop? Because that's going to influence the way that you coach, right? If you think about certain things or skills, then you're probably going to push and you're going to do more repetitions to build those different elements in people. So decision point. So something just to think about that I want to give you all is, you have information in your packet, and I want to go through a little bit of how you might see these mindsets so you can start to identify them. And then there's one page that has some coaching behaviors for you to kind of just reflect for yourself. How might I be unintentionally developing one of these mindsets or the other? And how can I spend more time over here? But tell me, how do you think, so these are some of the symptoms. Fixed mindset, we tend to avoid challenges. I give the bill to somebody else when I sit down in a restaurant and I get it, right? Give up in the face of setbacks. If I'm doing a math problem, if I'm trying to do something and I get the wrong answer, I throw my hands up and I quit. See, effort is worthless. I've been trying. I could put effort in all day and it's not gonna make me any better. Ignore criticism, useful or not. So when someone tries to help me, like for example with the bill, and I'm like, here, will you do it? And Mike, in his like genuineness, is like, no, here, let me help you, Petra. If you just move the little decimal over here and add a little bit, and I'm like, stop, like just stop, right? I don't want, even if it's useful, even if it could help me, I really don't want to hear it. And I'm threatened by the success of others. So if I see other people like trying to buy a house and like doing like double figure numbers and percentages and they just throw out, and I'm like, I just don't like you. You make me feel really uncomfortable, right? How do these things show up in your athletes on the ultimate field? What does that look like? I suck, right? I just can't do this. What else?
My forehand sucks.
They often might not try as hard to give themselves an out for why they didn't succeed, so they don't have to like challenge themselves.
Yeah, like if I'm not giving my full effort, then technically I'm not failing, which means I'm not a failure, right? So yeah, you might not see people give full effort. What else? How else does that show up?
It's a very judgmental mindset, like personally, on yourself.
Yeah.
You're never gonna grow, or you're never gonna get better with that type of mindset.
Yeah, so maybe you'll just see kind of how they turn in on themselves if they make a mistake. That might be one way that it shows up.
Like you purposely avoid like the more difficult matchups or like things like that. Even if like you're a more experienced player, you might not necessarily want the other captain on the team or something.
Yeah, don't think for a second this is for your newbies.
Yeah.
Don't you dare. Some of the most elite athletes can be stuck in a fixed mindset. And then like in those moments when they're fearing failure, like they've been chosen for the line and they're going to say like, no, why don't somebody else take so-and-so? In that moment, that avoiding of the challenge. Or if you, like with your athletes, if it's game point and you're in the place where you're like, hey, if you want it, go get it. Who are the athletes that run on and who are the athletes that are like, don't look at me, coach, right? And just how does that show up? So just a few more, so maybe opting out. The kids, and I'm going to say this with the understanding that you all know the athletes that you have and you all know, like, trust the athletes with their bodies. But I'm going to say this one, like, they have to run laps and the kid that suddenly comes up and is like, my ankles hurt. And I poke fun at that. That was me as a kid, as an athlete. Like I was a goalkeeper in soccer, and if we were about to go run, I was like, I don't feel so good all of a sudden. I wish I'd known this before because I probably man, who knows? Because I never put the full effort in. So look at making excuses for why they can't do something or opting out of things. So giving up, half-hearted effort, we've talked about that. The self-talk that you'll hear. What are the words? Like often we verbalize what's happening in our head. And little did you all know that as you were doing the drills downstairs, I was watching you and what you do and how you react to mistakes. And so make sure you know your fixed mindset because you're modeling, right? So if you're doing a drill and you're demonstrating and you make a mistake, in that moment, what you do to yourself, your kids are watching, right? So if you make a mistake and you hang your head or you say, come on, Kowalski, get it together, guess what they're gonna do? So be hyper aware of how you might be demonstrating this in yourself. And if they seem defensive when giving feedback or coaching. So just being aware of like, hey, where are my kids that are fixed mindset? And then let's talk about growth mindset. What does this look like? So embracing challenges, persisting in the face of setback, effort is the key to mastery, learning from criticism, and inspired by the success of others.
Perfect player.
They're setting challenges that are pretty difficult, and that takes some risk.
Yeah, so like they might set their sights on something. They might be the people that like when you say, hey, I need a few volunteers to demonstrate this new drill. They're probably going to be your kids who are like, yeah, I'm in, coach, no big deal. Because they know if they mess up, if they make a mistake in front of everybody, it's okay. They're still the person that they are. How else does that show up?
Like when they ask if they can try something out, like, can I try pulling or can I handle this point? Stuff like that.
Yeah, those kids are like, hey, coach, can I pull? Can I do this? Can I do that? And so think about like in those moments, sometimes as coaches are we like, oh. Like you might have that moment for yourself like, wow, I really don't want you to pull right now. Because it might be in a game that they come up to you. But just be thinking about like, again, how you respond in that moment. Hey, maybe can you still respond and say, hey, not right now, but let's make sure that we get you that chance. I didn't know you were interested. Let's practice that. So do think about how you respond in those moments. What else? I like that.
They might come and ask you for critique or what could I do to improve? What other things could I do?
Yeah, what can I improve on? They're the people that are coming to you asking for that type of feedback. So just a few more. And you'll see this, so like giving up and frustrated versus persevering. Like in a drill, if they can't get it right, it might be the kid that then's like, wait, how are you doing this? And they're watching really intently versus the kid that's like, well, I've messed up a few times and the next time they stand up and they're just like, right, just gonna like chuck that disc, I can't do that. So giving full effort. And again, there's self-talk. So here's one thing, you might hear, man, I'm just not good at this yet. Anytime, and I would encourage you, anytime you hear an athlete to say something like, I'm just not good at this, I just can't do this, just start adding yet. Even that simple word for them is gonna be like, oh, you think I can do this? That's interesting. And can you slowly move them from one side to the other? For most people that I've worked with, not all of these show up for every person, right? Usually, when you present this to an athlete, they kind of recognize like, oh, like it's this one thing. It's this one thing that I see, you know what, I never try in that area. You know, like I run, but I don't lift because I'm never going to build any muscle. Like you'll see one of those things will tend to resonate them. So you won't see all of them, but you might just see one or a few. And then the last thing that I have for you all is just like recognizing some of the coaching behaviors. And so you have one page that has sort of just these prompts on them. And then you have one page on the back that has a few examples. And I would encourage you to go through and think about your own way of developing fixed or growth mindset. What are the things that you do that you say? There's some examples on the back page if you need a little bit of a prompt, but like, look at this. So emphasizing outcomes or superior performance. How often do we as coaches say things like, we really have to win this game, right? Or even games like redemption, right? So that game of redemption, that competitive atmosphere of last person standing wins, in that moment, now, psychological experiment for you all to go play redemption and watch how people respond when they get out. You will see fixed and growth mindset come out in that game. And even like inter-individual competitions, be careful with how you use those, because are you setting kids up to be threatened by the success of other people and think like, wow, I'm not as good as that person, or that person's always going to be better than me. And these are other things at the end of a game, if you win, what do you say? Why did you win? If you lose, what do you say? Why did you lose? And being aware of attributing the success or failure to things that are outside of your control. So even simple things like, wow, that wind was just killer today. That's why we lost. How is that helpful? Because it can be helpful. Why is that helpful to your athletes? We lost because of the wind.
Rationalizes it for them, so it's no longer their fault.
It makes...
Well, we need to adjust our strategy for the wind next time or something.
Or improve our windy throws in the wind.
Yeah, so there's ways you can change it. So saying that, like rationalizing it, it makes us feel better in the moment. It makes like a lot of times, like coaches, we care. And when your kids lose, you kind of want to make them feel better. Like, you know, you want to help them out. And so sometimes we blame it on uncontrollable things. We say, hey, it was the wind, or like, you know, the other team was making really bad calls, or there's any way of rationalizing or putting it on external or uncontrollable things makes us feel better in the moment. But what does that show next time it's windy?
We have an out.
We have an out. There's nothing that we can do. And so the opposite of that is making sure that you're attributing your successes and failures to things that are controllable. Hey, you know what? We haven't been practicing in the wind as much. We haven't had that opportunity. We're going to make sure that we get out on some windy days. That's something that we can improve.
Played better in the wind.
Yeah. So say it again.
The other team played better in the wind.
Yeah. You know what? The other team played better in the wind. We can
still be that team that plays better in the wind.
Yeah.
We really need to practice our end zone so we can cash in on those opportunities.
Yeah, so going to things that they can control. Making sure that we're attributing both success and failure to things that are within our control, because then we can do something about it. We've talked about praise, demonstrating a low tolerance for mistakes versus teaching that mistakes, failure, and challenges opportunities for growth. So Scott mentioned this morning. It's so much easier said than done. And something with this, and I would highly encourage you, I will give you a few prompts, and I might send an email out to you all afterwards, but do reflect on your personal individual beliefs about failure. Do you actually believe that failure is acceptable? You don't have to answer that now, but like really turn into yourself, and is that true? Like, can I get to that place where like failing is okay? That making mistakes is okay? Because if you can't get there, this is going to be really challenging. And so it's important to do that self-awareness piece as a coach to say, what are my beliefs and how is that driving my behavior? Right? Because if you can't get to this place, it's going to be challenging. And one of the ways, again, that this shows up is tolerance of your own mistakes. And sometimes, like, I guess think through this with me. Could you believe that mistakes are okay for your athletes, like those are a great place for your athletes to learn, and hold a different standard for yourself? I'm playing with that in my mind. Like, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, I could do that. And
Depends on the type of mistake.
yeah.
So the athlete makes a terrible throw that goes out of bounds. Play stops for a second. Athlete
throws the hat,
Mhm.
and then runs up on the mark, and like uses that as motivation. What is that?
So they make a mistake and then they're like getting back on D quickly.
They're mad at themselves.
Yeah,
Like,
but they're
I'm
using
myself.
it.
Fuck. You know what I mean? I get angry.
Why are you mad? Why are you angry? Why are you mad at yourself?
Like letting down, like I did a bad thing for the team. Like like I feel terrible.
Okay.
Right?
So we could go, easy answer, we could go, he's motivated by shame or guilt. Right? Like you let your team down. So you're mad at yourself.
And that motivated you to play harder.
And in that moment, so we know that type of motivation, does it work? Absolutely. Are you motivating yourself then to like play really hard D?
Right.
Yeah. So that's like a useful source of motivation for you. If that carries on, like point ends, let's say you end up getting scored on, point ends, how long do you hold on to that for? Is it still serving you well? In that moment, it served you well, being angry at yourself, but is it still serving you well if you're now walking on the sideline and you're holding that cloud over your head and everyone's like, whoa, like, like, is it still serving you well? It might, or is it now gonna increase your anxiety, and the next time you go out, are you gonna be thinking, I can't let my team down, I can't let my team down, I can't let my team down, and what does that do? I'm really good at giving questions that answer and don't answer at the same time. I think we've covered most of this. So what I want to do is, so going back a little bit to just where we've talked about, this underlying mindset is going to influence, like it plays hand in hand with the type of motivation that you use. And the point of, like the reason I said, hey, how you coach matters, the reason I titled it this, because it does. What I tried to get to in this are, I want you all to be aware of the little things that you say. How do you motivate your team to do a certain drill? How do you motivate your team to run, to be fit? What are the things you say? What are the things you do that are either modeling fixture growth and showing one type of motivation or another, right? And just kind of checking in with making sure that you're aware of how your own fixed mindset is probably also influencing your coaching. Questions from here, and then I'm gonna wrap up because I have to. Good. I'm going to say one more thing, which is going back to, I talked about how you can develop the internal motivation for your team, like where you can get to the point where your team is motivating themselves. What I want to do, it was really interesting in C's presentation talking about individual identity, player identity, line identity, team identity, thank you, delegation and community. And what was really interesting is for me is going back in the line identity, that was where she got most close to this. The line identities that she described were scrappy, right? Or we're quick like hummingbirds, or whatever, we're smooth like eagles, right? So that was here. That was like actions, but that represents who we are. And do you sometimes see like that strongest motivation on those small lines, where that's the identity we create? I would encourage you to do that for your whole team. So, and there's an activity, and what I'll do is, if you're interested, I'll give you my email, send me an email, and I can send out, there's an activity that you can run at the beginning of the season. I think it's similar probably to what you did when you talked about what type of culture do we want to build on this team. And C was talking about coaches, we often think like, okay, this is the culture I want my team to have, and then you have players that do something else. Bring them into that conversation. Allow your players to develop their own team culture and their own identity, and you sort of take them from a conversation about like, what was your favorite team? Like, what were the things that represented that team? They'll give you values. Your high schoolers will give you value words, and you get small groups, like each individual to write some down, to small groups, to a big group. You end up with a whole list of values, like whiteboard the whole thing, be in a classroom. You get a list of values, you start to blend them together, and you ask your team like, okay, of this list, who do we want to be as a team? And they'll highlight the values that they want. So it'll be like respect. They'll throw out values, hard work, perseverance. We want to be able to be scrappy. And then define what that means. Respect will mean things like showing up to practice on time. So now if a kid shows up to practice late, you don't have to punish them. You don't have to use that other end of the motivation spectrum. Now what you say is, our team value is respect, and you're late. Like, let's have a conversation about that. Well, what do we do when you violate one of the team values, right? And the players, that's how the players start to hold each other accountable, because they've developed this. It's not that you've told them who they're going to be. They've decided who they're going to be and what that's going to look like for them. So that's a really cool activity that you can do. Cool. So thank you. I would love, if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me. I would be more than happy to help. There's other activities like the one we did in the gym that I can either teach you to run or come up and run if I have the chance. I'm happy to do that.